right, from That Thing You Do, music and lyric by Adam Schlesinger. And from Evita, You Must Love Me, music by Andrew Lloyd Webber and lyric by Tim Rice.
October 11, 2025, Hollywood was in shock upon receiving the news that Diane Keaton, a legend of the silver screen, had taken her last breath at the age of 79. Her passing not only closed a brilliant chapter in American cinema, but also left a profound void in the hearts of those who loved her graceful awkwardness and deeply humane soul. Diane Keaton wasn't just a star. She was an icon of independence, a woman who dared to live authentically amidst the glitz and glamour. Throughout more than half a century of dedication, Diane endured stormy years, leaving home to chase her dream, struggling in damp, rented rooms in New York, suffering countless rejections, and battling persistent loneliness. Yet, amidst these trials, a fateful encounter with Goldie Hawn steered her life in a different direction, a friendship that became a beacon of warmth for her soul. Then, at Diane's funeral, Goldie Hawn silenced the entire world. No one expected that, in that moment of farewell, she would speak the one thing Diane had never revealed in her life, a shared memory that brought the room to tears. What did she say? You must watch until the end of the video, because these were the parting words that choked up all of Hollywood. Born in 1946 in Los Angeles, Diane Keaton grew up caught between two opposing worlds, the dazzling external glamour of Hollywood and the quiet, stifling atmosphere of the Hall family home. Her father, Jack Hall, was a strict man who believed order was the foundation of everything. Her mother, Dorothy Diane Keaton Hall, Miss Los Angeles 1955, was once celebrated as an emblem of beauty and success, but after marriage, the spotlight faded. The woman who once walked to applause was now silently washing dishes under a dim kitchen light. We prayed together every night, Diane recounted, but we never said anything that truly mattered to each other. At 9, Diane witnessed her mother abandon the stage, a moment that haunted her for life. Dorothy's smile gradually diminished, as if her inner world had been extinguished. For Diane, it wasn't just sadness, it was a warning. Don't let life consume your dreams. While her peers dreamt of white picket fences and dinners with wealthy husbands, Diane was only captivated by the stage lights. Teachers called her stubborn, friends labeled her unusual. But Diane understood it wasn't rebellion, but a burning desire to live truly. In a high school play, embodying Blanche DuBois in a streetcar named Desire, Diane found what she'd always sought, the feeling of being understood. It was the first time I felt I had value, she once said. In 1966, at age 20, Diane packed a few clothes and books and boarded a Greyhound bus bound for New York. She left Los Angeles and the surname Hall behind, choosing Diane Keaton, her mother's maiden name, as a way to continue the dream Dorothy had abandoned. Every time someone calls out Miss Keaton, I hear my mother speaking, she shared. New York greeted her with cold wind and gray skies. Her first Upper West Side apartment was cramped, with peeling wallpaper, leaking pipes, and a wheezing heater. Every night, Diane would wrap herself in an old coat, gazing out the window where the city lights reflected on patches of melting snow. But within that solitude, a new fire began to ignite. The fire of the real Diane Keaton, fragile, stubborn, but never bowing to fate. Diane began her quest for her first role, a journey like stepping into a labyrinth where dreams and reality fiercely collided. Hollywood isn't a place for the faint-hearted. It demands resilience, blind faith, and the ability to get up after hundreds of rejections. One dreary winter morning, the sky was gray and bitterly cold. Diane stood huddled amongst a long line of strangers waiting to audition. In a small, smoke-filled room above a cafe, the judge glanced at her resume and looked up, uttering a few indifferent words. Too tall. Too odd. Doesn't fit the image. These seemingly harmless phrases carved deep into her heart, yet Diane smiled, bowed her thanks, and left. To survive, she waited tables at noon, and by night she sang in hazy basements where the audience was just a scattering of drunks. Her voice was hoarse, trembling from hunger and cold. "I wasn't passionate about singing," Diane once said, "but if I didn't sing, I wouldn't survive." Some nights, she and a friend would split a stale loaf of bread, laughing as if hunger were merely a youthful test. The freezing boarding room, the sputtering heater, and the wind howling through the window were the soundtrack to her unextinguished dreams. Her best shoes were pawned. She walked instead of taking the subway, just to save enough for a cup of coffee and rent. When the lights went out, Diane continued writing scripts by candlelight, pressing her hand against the cold window pane, whispering to herself, "No, I won't stop yet." And perhaps those whispers were heard, because shortly after, the first door of destiny began to open. In 1968, after 2 long years spent amidst failed auditions and unpaid bills, Diane unexpectedly received a phone call, just a few minutes, but enough to change her entire life. The sensation-sweeping Broadway musical Hair was looking for an unpolished face, raw, authentic, and instinctive. Diane arrived at the audition barefoot, her eyes sunken from hunger, her voice shaking but her gaze burning bright. When the performance ended, the room was silent for a long time. Then the director spoke, his words forever altering her life. "You don't have to change anything." That night, under the blinding white lights of the Broadway stage, the 20 years of stillness within her shattered into pieces. The audience wasn't looking for perfection. They simply loved seeing an authentic girl. And from that moment, a legend began to form, not in the roaring applause, but in the eyes of a woman who had just found herself on stage. In 1972, the biggest turning point in Diane Keaton's life arrived, when Francis Ford Coppola offered her the role of Kay Adams in the masterpiece The Godfather. As Kay Adams, Michael Corleone's future bride, Keaton stood as the only softness in a world built on power. Not only did the film propel her to stardom, but it also gave her what she had struggled to find throughout her childhood: widespread public validation. In 1977, Annie Hall became a phenomenon. Her hesitant smile, off-kilter laugh, turtleneck sweaters, vests, and wide-brimmed hats became a fashion statement. Remarkably, this wasn't the work of a stylist, but Diane's own unmistakable personal style. The screen displayed an image, bright, vibrant, and delightfully confusing. When the Oscar statuette was in her hands, Diane thought she had reached the finish line. But later, in her empty kitchen, with just a glass of wine and an anxiety attack, she whispered, "Is this what public adoration feels like? It's so lonely." She soon realized that the glamour couldn't last. Fame sparkled like a diamond, but was no different from glass, fragile, ready to cut and wound. Every new script carried a silent threat. You must deliver, or someone else will take your place. To convince filmmakers, Diane had to work until dawn, fingers stained with ink, eyes burning under fluorescent light. For years, she relentlessly pursued her career. "I didn't sleep for 48 hours, she confessed. "I was afraid that stopping meant losing everything." The audience's applause was no longer a joy, but echoed like a warning siren. Some nights she drove through Los Angeles, rolling down the window to let the cold slap her face, trying to remember how she started. "I used to think success would make me happy, but it only made me more miserable." When Reds was released in 1981, Warren Beatty demanded everything she had. The performance was raw, passionate, bright as fire, but something inside her was dying. "I remember crying in the car after filming," she said. "I didn't know what I was living for anymore." Then the 1980s arrived, bringing a gust of change and a downward slide Diane never anticipated. The Little Drummer Girl, 1984, an ambitious project, failed miserably, only recouping half its budget. Critics coldly turned their backs. Meanwhile, Hollywood was feverishly hunting for younger, fresher faces. Diane Keaton was quickly labeled a fading, soon-to-be obsolete star. "Everyone thought I was still A-list," she later admitted, "but the reality was I was plummeting." She was forced to disappear from the screen to save herself. Diane turned down multi-million-dollar roles because, to her, fame was an illusion, bringing only pain. The world that once courted her now grew cold and indifferent, as if her roles had never existed. But Diane Keaton, as always, began anew in the shadow of the very legend she had created. She wrote, she directed, and she constantly waited for another chance. "Applause fades," Diane shared. "No one can be famous forever." New beginnings weren't easy. Her scripts were rejected. Projects couldn't secure funding. Every slammed door was a sharp reminder of her lost standing. Persistence turned into obsession, and repeated failures dragged her into a deep abyss. Solitude transformed into depression. Some days Diane couldn't get out of bed, and her inner voice was just a string of complaints and self-criticism. Fame was now a burden. She began to wonder, was she anything more than her past roles? Was there any light left at the end of this tunnel? Even her signature laugh became foreign, just a lost echo in her overly large house. Hollywood had abandoned her, and she had abandoned herself. In 1996, destiny arranged for Diane Keaton to meet Goldie Hawn, a woman who seemed to step out of a different light spectrum than her world. They met on the set of The First Wives Club, a film about 3 betrayed women who rise up to reclaim themselves. By this time, Diane had become utterly tranquil. After the burdens of life, broken relationships, and loneliness, she had retreated, avoiding all trouble. Diane lived so secludedly that, although always smiling for the camera, her eyes held an inexplicable sadness. Goldie entered her life like a flash of light. In Goldie, there was an energy that lit up the whole room, a booming laugh, a spontaneous hug, and a way of drawing people close as if everyone were an old friend. Initially, Diane kept her distance. She found Goldie too loud and too free. But then that very too much became what intrigued and motivated Diane. During breaks between takes, Diane sat silently staring into her cold cup of coffee. Goldie saw her. She walked over, gently draped her coat over Diane's shoulders, and said in a low voice, "Hey, sometimes you don't have to pretend to be so strong. Let someone else carry a little of it." That moment felt like a touch deep inside her heart. From that moment, Goldie became the person who made Diane feel safe to be herself. In the years that followed, their bond became almost sacred. They had dinners that lasted until dawn, where they sat together, sipping wine, discussing hobbies, and sometimes not needing to say a word. There were phone calls that ended in laughter, and silences where both understood. Silence was also a form of love. Goldie loved Diane's quiet courage, the way she walked through pain with lightness, and Diane admired Goldie's pure joy, the energy that made life less serious, less heavy. "She carries an air of pure joy," Diane once said, "and she taught me how to enjoy life." In a highly competitive world where women were often forced to choose between success and kindness, they chose gentleness. When awards came, they toasted each other without a hint of jealousy. When disappointment hit, they disappeared into a small kitchen with red wine, warm bread, and comfort that needed no words. Once, at dinner in Malibu, the golden light reflected on the glass. Diane raised her glass, smiling softly. to the woman who reminded me that laughter is also a way we pray. The room was silent for a few seconds. Then Goldie smiled gently, her eyes twinkling. That was the sound Diane always said she would remember for life. Because amidst a bustling Hollywood, these two women found something that fame and the spotlight could never provide: a healing friendship. According to Goldie Hawn's sharing, after decades of living fully for art and her career, Diane Keaton had a major turning point in her life. She decided to become a mother by adopting a baby girl named Dexter. "At the time, I was afraid of being alone," she once shared. "Then she came, and suddenly the world was full of color." Dexter was not just a child she took in. The girl was proof of the burning maternal desire of a woman who thought she had missed her chance. The career continued, but in her small sunlit house, Diane was no longer alone. She woke up to a morning with her child calling Mommy. 5 years later, she adopted Duke, an active boy. "Since Duke arrived, my house hasn't been quiet," she recounted. "But it's the most beautiful noise I've ever known." In the evenings, when the two children laughed under the living room lights, Diane sat watching and smiling. The emptiness that had haunted her youth was now filled by that laughter. For Diane, family was not something naturally given, but something you choose and nurture every day. She once said, "No one has a perfect home. We just need to choose each other, love each other, and stubbornly stay." That was the philosophy that helped her raise her children with a balance of discipline and affection, teaching them that happiness wasn't in perfection, but in knowing how to forgive and how to return. People often say Diane Keaton rebirthed herself in her 50s. And it's true, through raising children, she rebuilt herself. In a house filled with laughter, she was no longer the center of the world, but the center of a small universe named family. When Diane Keaton left this world, Goldie Hawn did not wail, nor did she resort to flowery words. Her grief was silent as the morning dew, permeating every breath, every pause between old memories. It was a pain that didn't need to be displayed, but which made one feel the clear weight of an absence, when the person who once made you laugh was no longer on this earth. At the memorial in Los Angeles, Goldie stood in the front row, holding a single white rose. Her fingers trembled as she leaned down, trying to place the flower on the glass podium. For a moment, she couldn't. Her body refused to accept what her heart already knew. Diane was truly gone. When Goldie finally spoke, her voice was shaky and full of sincerity. "Diane didn't just make us laugh. She gave us permission to be ourselves. She was the best friend I ever had, and her passing breaks my heart." A few people burst into tears, others bowed their heads, and in that moment, even Hollywood, where every emotion is rehearsed and filmed, bowed before something purer, a friendship that never faded. When the ceremony ended, the crowd slowly dispersed, but Goldie remained. She placed the rose next to the portrait and whispered, "I'll never forget you." As night fell and Los Angeles was immersed in silence, in the fragile time before dawn, Goldie swore she could still hear it, Diane's unmistakable laughter softly echoing down the glamorous boulevard. Tears slowly streamed down her face, and she turned and never looked back. Perhaps that is precisely how Diane Keaton wanted to be remembered, as a soul forever immortal. The stillness that had haunted Diane her whole life finally found her again. But this time, it was no longer loneliness, but full of admiration and boundless love. Diane Keaton's legacy for women worldwide. Perhaps no one in Hollywood was loved for their graceful awkwardness like Diane Keaton. On screen, she was the woman who laughed through tears, was clumsy in love, and awkward when facing failure. She once declared, "I never try to be perfect." In the film Something's Gotta Give, 2003, Diane played a screenwriter in her 50s, solitary and awkward in love. When the film premiered, millions of women cried. Not just because of the beautiful love story, but because they saw themselves in it. In the awkwardness, in the fear of being left behind, and in the hope that love could still arrive regardless of age. Diane Keaton brought imperfection to the screen and made it radiant. She proved that authenticity, with all its cracks and vulnerabilities, could be more beautiful than any perfect mold. That is why the audience still loved her, even though she never tried to make them love her. In an era where confidence and seduction became the standard, Diane chose the opposite path. She chose fragility. Vulnerability is not weakness, she once said. It's a form of sacred strength. For Diane, true strength didn't come from always being right or strong, but from the ability to dare to admit that you are afraid, lonely, and in need of love. She publicly spoke about her own insecurities, about age, about love, about the fear of not being chosen. By doing so, she erased the boundary between star and ordinary woman. The audience saw Diane not as a distant legend, but as a friend. She once confessed, "I think I spent half my life being afraid I wasn't good enough. And then I realized maybe no one is ever truly good enough." And that was a relief. This is the philosophy that helped millions of women smile, because Diane didn't tell them to be strong, but told them they had the right to be weak. Because weakness, in the hands of a person who understands themselves, can also be a form of courage. If Hollywood is a place that worships youth, Diane Keaton was its gentlest rebel. While many contemporary actors chose to hide wrinkles and gray hair, Diane chose to wear a hat and laugh. She let her hair go naturally gray, dressed the way she liked, and even wrote an entirely humorous book as a declaration that no one needs to be eternally beautiful to be worth living. Aging without apology. That's what Diane encouraged people to do. She believed that age wasn't an ending, but the most beautiful chapter if one dared to live fully. "I don't want to be young again. I just want to continue to be the woman I'm learning to love every day," she affirmed. Throughout her career, Diane went through crises, broken loves, failed roles, but she never hid it. She let the audience see her stumble, be confused, but always get back up with a smile. "I've done a lot of stupid things, but I'm still here, and I think that's an achievement." Today, Diane Keaton retains that same gentle quality, both peculiar and genuine. She is not a symbol of perfection, but a symbol of truth. Critic Peter Travers once wrote, "Diane Keaton never needed to prove anything. She just needed to show up, and the world was reminded that kindness can also be a rebellion." That is her greatest legacy, a revolution wrapped in kindness. Not loud, not imposing, just a woman who dared to be gentle in a world that favored noise. Diane Keaton has lived, loved, laughed, cried, and proved that women don't need to be perfect to shine. They only need to be honest, with themselves and with this world. Diane Keaton is gone, but the legacy she leaves behind is not just in Oscar statuettes or immortal roles. What the world remembers about Diane is her spirit of freedom and unyielding gentleness. All her life, she never tried to be anyone other than herself, a strange, indifferent, yet profoundly deep woman. She turned imperfections into her own allure, transformed clumsiness into grace and solitude into art. In a world where women are demanded to be perfect, Diane chose to live authentically, laugh loudly, love deeply, and never apologize for her age or choices. Now, as the lights dim and the screen is empty, Diane remains. In classic films, in the inspiration she gave millions of women who dare to live truly. She once said, "Vulnerability is not weakness, it's a privilege." And perhaps it is that very vulnerability that has made Diane Keaton immortal. She leaves not as a movie star, but as a soul who completed her mission to teach the world how to love itself, Hollywood, it's not a place of light, but the sanctuary of light arrangement. Here, every crack of truth is not concealed, but embellished, rewritten, and packaged into a luxury called the American dream. Every movement on screen, every blink, is rehearsed through hours of rehearsal. They learn to sob at the perfect rhythm, laugh at the most flattering camera angle, and even how to wear loneliness as a seductive piece of jewelry. On the red carpet, they stride like perfectly crafted creatures, part human, the rest a product to be priced. Every flash of the camera is a cut to the soul, sold to buy a few seconds of immortality in the press. The sound of the camera shutter is not fireworks, but the sound of mass consumption, a warning that the spotlight only exists as long as the actor allows it to burn them. When the velvet curtain closes, laughter shatters in champagne glasses, leaving behind floors strewn with lavish dresses and the smell of makeup mixed with exhaustion. They look in the mirror, seeing the face that was once an emblem of desire, now just a tired draft of themselves. They drink not in celebration, but to erase memories, then drink more to forget they are trying to forget. In the glass and steel mansions on the hills, the soothing jazz music is no longer entertainment, but a curtain concealing gasps of fatigue. In Hollywood, loneliness is not a consequence of fame. It is the prerequisite for sustaining fame. In this place, success is nurtured not by natural light, but by the darkness of the soul, by the craving to be worshipped, by the extreme fear of being forgotten, and by the intense addiction to the crowd's gaze. Every legend here is a perfectly staged tragedy. Youth is distilled, love is publicly executed, and peace is crushed under the stiletto heels of celebrity. And then, when the stage light turns on for the last time, the audience still sees a brilliant smile. But Hollywood, who knows better than anyone, sees a soul that has burned out in silence. Because here, dreams are never lived. They are only reenacted until the actor forgets who they truly were.